Hello guys, welcome back to TFD. Week 2 of the season is nearly wrapped up, and things kicked off on Thursday night with the matchup between the Commanders and the Packers. Green Bay came out on top with a 27-18 victory. Now, while the scoreboard might make this game look like it was competitive, the reality on the field told a much different story. Through the first 3 quarters, the Packers piled up 345 total yards compared to just 112 for Washington. That pretty much paints the picture of how this game was played. At one point, Jayden Daniels was sitting at 8 completions on 13 attempts for only 43 passing yards, which really highlights the struggles this Commanders offense had moving the ball. For Green Bay, the big takeaway is the same as it was after Week 1. This defense is for real. They look like they have the kind of unit that can push them into Super Bowl conversations. Micah Parsons was once again everywhere on the field, making plays that don't always show up in the box score but completely shift the game. And on the offensive side, Tucker Kraft put together the best game of his career so far, hauling in 6 receptions for 124 yards, giving Jordan Love another reliable option. As for the Commanders, this is a tough spot. Expectations were pretty high coming into the season, but the concerns I had about this team are starting to show. They're not a terrible team by any means, but they don't seem like a great one either. The talent at the skill positions just doesn't appear to be enough to elevate this offense against stronger competition. And with Daniels struggling in this game, it only added to that issue. So it wasn't one glaring problem for Washington, but more so the collection of little things that point to them being an average team instead of a legit contender. This matchup really emphasized that gap. Now let's shift to Sunday and the Ravens vs. Browns matchup, which featured a classic Joe Flacco vs. Lamar Jackson showdown. Baltimore took care of business, cruising to a 41-7 win. But even with the lopsided score, this wasn't exactly the offensive clinic you might think. The Ravens only managed 46 rushing yards as a team and totaled just 243 yards of offense. Credit where it's due, the Browns' defense held up well. Unfortunately for Cleveland, a few critical mistakes at the wrong times turned the game into a blowout. At 13-3, Nate Wiggins intercepted a pass and took it all the way back to the Browns' 5-yard line, setting up a Baltimore touchdown that made it 20-3. After that, each team scored once more, and then Baltimore added a defensive touchdown to put the game out of reach. My concern for Cleveland going into the season was exactly this. If they get stuck in games like this, particularly against a team like the Ravens, they don't have enough firepower to mount a comeback. Their defense has looked solid through 2 games, but the offense and special teams just haven't delivered yet. As for Baltimore, I thought this could have been a trap game, but they handled it the right way and got the win. Not every game is going to be like Week 1 against Buffalo offensively. And while the Ravens weren't flashy on offense in Week 2, one thing all Ravens fans can agree on: an ugly win beats a beautiful loss any day. We got what looked like one of the potential quarterback duels of the year down in the Big Easy as Mac Jones squared off with Spencer Rattler, and both quarterbacks really showed out. Jones threw for just under 300 yards and 3 touchdowns as the 49ers pulled out a 26-21 win. What stood out was how balanced their passing attack was. 5 different San Francisco players had at least 30 receiving yards. Now, the 49ers have already been dealing with a wave of injuries to start the year, but the big headline is they're sitting at 2-0 with both wins coming on the road. That's huge. Last year, defense was a nightmare for this team at times, but Robert Saleh's group came up with key stops in crunch time here. To add even more context, the Niners were just 2-6 in one-score games last season, and in 2025 they've already flipped that script by starting 2-0 in those exact situations. Once this roster gets healthy, they're going to be a fun team to keep tabs on. As for New Orleans, yes, they're clearly in a rebuild, but there are still plenty of positives to take away. Rookie tackle Kelvin Banks looked solid outside of a mistake or 2, which is a great sign for just his second career start. Spencer Rattler also delivered another encouraging performance, showing real flashes of what he can become. And don't overlook Jonas Sanker. When he was called upon, he stepped up and played well. That's exactly what you want in a rebuilding year. Identifying your foundational pieces. The Saints might not rack up a ton of wins this season, but you can already see building blocks emerging for the future. The Buffalo Bills took care of business against the New York Jets in Week 2, cruising to a 30-10 victory. For most of the afternoon, this wasn't even as close as the final score might suggest, as the game sat at 30-3 well into the fourth quarter. Going into this one, I had some concerns about whether this would be a trap game for Buffalo. After all, they lost to the Jets in MetLife in both 2022 and 2023, and division opponents know you better than anyone. But the Bills didn't let history repeat itself. They ran for over 220 yards as a team, and 4 of their drives that went 60 yards or more ended with points on the board. On the defensive side, Joey Bosa put together a standout performance, and the Bills' defense as a whole limited the Jets to just 154 total yards. The only touchdown New York managed came late in garbage time with Tyrod Taylor leading the drive. Outside of the brief injury scare with Josh Allen, which he thankfully returned from, it was about as smooth of a Sunday as Bills Mafia could ask for. Now for the Jets, that 30-10 final looks much kinder than how this game actually played out. And just for clarity, their lone touchdown drive was entirely led by Tyrod Taylor. For anyone waiting to pile on Justin Fields and this Jets team, this was the perfect storm: shaky quarterback play, breakdowns on defense, and costly penalties that kept the Bills rolling. Brandon Stephens continues to be a liability in coverage, and on the very first drive of the game, Michael Clemens committed a roughing the passer on 3rd and 19. That penalty extended the drive, Buffalo went on to score, and it set the tone for the disaster that followed. For the Jets, this is one of those games you simply throw the tape away, regroup, and try to bounce back the next week. We're on to Cincinnati for the Jaguars vs. Bengals matchup, and this one turned into a thriller with the Bengals pulling out a 31-27 victory. At the time of this recording, the status of Joe Burrow is still unclear after he left the game early. Of course, we wish him, and anyone else around the league dealing with injuries this week, a speedy recovery and hope to see them back on the field soon. As for Cincinnati, the bottom line is simple: 2-0 is 2-0. You never apologize for stacking wins, especially when you've pulled them out the way the Bengals have to start this season. This feels like a huge step forward compared to some of the early season struggles we've seen from them in recent years. Credit goes to Jake Browning for stepping in and doing his job when called upon, and also to Zach Taylor for putting together a game plan that gave him confidence. Obviously, the Bengals' long-term success in 2025 rests heavily on Joe Burrow's health, but right now they're undefeated, and that's what matters most. On the Jaguars side, this one has to sting. Brian Thomas Jr. had 12 targets but came away with just 4 catches and multiple drops. That puts him at only 5 receptions on 19 targets through 2 games, which is rough. It's important to remember that a lot of his breakout moments last year came when Mac Jones was under center, so this feels like a different situation entirely. And the frustrating part is this was a very winnable game for Jacksonville. Yes, there's definitely a conversation to be had about the Devin Lloyd interception. That play will be debated, but ultimately the Jaguars let this one slip. And looking ahead, their schedule gets a whole lot tougher. We're going to learn very quickly what Liam Cohen's team is really made of after a frustrating loss like this. Rams vs. Titans is up, and honestly, if you told me beforehand that the Rams would win this game 33-19, I wouldn't have been surprised at all. Heading into this matchup, the big question was simple: did anyone really think a Sean McVay-led team was going to lose to a Brian Callahan-coached team? For me, the answer was no. Yes, the Titans were missing guys like J.C. Latham and T'Vondre Sweat, but this team has been one of the most frustrating to watch week after week, and it comes back to coaching. 2 games into Cam Ward's rookie year, Tennessee already has 23 penalties. That sums it up right there. Honestly, I think Brian Callahan's days in Nashville could be numbered if this continues. That said, there are some positives for the Titans. The rookies showed flashes, particularly Cam Ward and Elko Eguanor. You can see potential in their development, and that's what Tennessee has to hang its hat on this season: the progression of its young talent. As for the Rams, they got off to a slow start but really came alive in the second half. Matthew Stafford delivered one of the prettiest throws you'll see all year, hitting Davante Adams for a touchdown that reminded everyone just how special he still is. This was very much a business trip for the Rams. They came in, got the job done, and left at 2-0. Sure, it was a bit more stressful at times than Rams fans might have liked, but the end result is all that matters. And also credit to Sean McVay for showing some class at the end. He easily could have run up the score but chose not to. Another NFC West versus AFC matchup took place in Pittsburgh, and it was the Seahawks who came away with a convincing 31-17 road win. The turning point of this game came on special teams, when rookie Caleb Johnson clearly didn't know the kickoff rules, leading to a Seattle touchdown. But honestly, even without that play, the Seahawks were in control for most of the afternoon. Seattle's defensive front was all over Aaron Rodgers, and that highlights one of my biggest concerns for the Steelers right now, the offensive line. They managed just 3.4 yards per carry on the ground, and Rodgers, at 41 years old, was under constant pressure. That's not a recipe for long-term success. Outside of a couple of moments, Jaylen Warren making some plays, Pat Freiermuth hauling in a nice sideline grab, and DK Metcalf scoring against his former team, this was a forgettable day for the Steelers offense. What's more concerning is that through 2 weeks, the areas Pittsburgh needed to at least be serviceable in offensive line play and run defense have both been major weaknesses. There's really no sugarcoating it. They've been bad, and it's costing them games. As for Seattle, one of the things I wanted to see was more balance in spreading the ball around. Their second leading receiver in Week 1 had only 15 yards, and they answered that in Week 2. Jackson Smith-Njigba put together his second straight 100-yard game and is playing lights-out football right now. On top of that, rookie Torrey Horton recorded his first career touchdown, which was a great moment to see. The Seahawks still need to clean up some details in their run game rotation, but the big takeaway here is simple. Anytime you win by double digits on the road, across the country, you take it. Seattle is 2-0, and they're looking strong. Who would have guessed one of the most entertaining games of the week would come from the Patriots and Dolphins? But that's exactly what we got, as New England held on and outlasted Miami for a 33-27 win. This was the Patriots' first victory in Miami since 2019, back when their quarterback was some guy named Thomas Brady, who I hear went on to do pretty well for himself. It was also the first time New England has scored 30 points in a game since October 16, 2022. No, it wasn't a flawless performance by any means, but the fight, toughness, and resilience they showed is exactly what you'd expect from a Mike Vrabel coach team. And of course, the biggest thing was simply getting the win. I walked away with 2 main takeaways for the Patriots. First, Josh McDaniels called a really solid game. Second, rookie quarterback Drake May looked sharp. This was always going to be a work in progress offensively, but you can clearly see progress being made. And I've got to give a shout out to Milton Williams, who played a key role as well. On the Miami side, it's tough to find positives here. Honestly, the best thing I can say is they've got Buffalo on Thursday night, but depending on how that one goes, we could be looking at the end of the Mike McDaniel, Chris Grier era by the end of this week. That's how bad things feel in Miami right now. This is a team that's not just losing, but underperforming in every way. And when it came down to crunch time, I had little confidence Tua could pull it out. The way the game ended felt unfortunately fitting for this Dolphins group. We're only 2 weeks in, but I keep circling back to the same question I asked all summer. What exactly is this team's plan? Giants versus Cowboys turned out to be one of the most entertaining games of the week, with the Cowboys pulling off a 40-37 overtime victory. For the Giants, this loss definitely stings, but there's no denying that this was a statement game for the offense after looking completely flat in Washington during Week 1. Russell Wilson exploded for 450 yards and 3 touchdowns, while Malik Nabers and Wan'Dale Robinson combined for a massive 309 yards and 3 scores of their own. On most Sundays, that's plenty to win, especially given the amount of money and draft capital New York has poured into its defense during Joe Schoen's tenure. So yes, dropping another game to Dallas hurts, but the offense deserves credit for bouncing back in a big way. And I'll throw it over to you Giants fans. What do you think of defensive coordinator Shane Bowen's decision to sit back in that soft prevent late in the 4th? Personally, I've always felt that prevent defenses do one thing. They prevent victories. On the Dallas side, I'll admit I underestimated how Brian Schottenheimer would have this offense rolling. This team refuses to quit. Dak Prescott threw for over 360 yards and 2 touchdowns, CeeDee Lamb posted his second straight 100-plus yard performance, and Javonte Williams looks rejuvenated through the first couple of weeks. Offensively, this was a strong showing for Dallas. Defensively, there's still work to be done, and the Cowboys wasted no time by signing Jadeveon Clowney right after the game. But at the end of the day, a win is a win. There's a massive difference between sitting at 1-1 versus 0-2. Oh, and one more thing. Brandon Aubrey continues to feel like a cheat code. He just doesn't miss. Lions-Bears is up, and let's start with Detroit. This was a statement game for the Lions. They circled this one on the calendar, knowing they were going up against their old offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, now leading the Bears, and they didn't just show up, they put on an offensive masterclass. Jared Goff was lights out, throwing for over 330 yards and 5 touchdowns, and the run game was just as deadly with nearly 180 yards and 2 more scores on the ground. The Lions piled up 511 yards of total offense, and their playmakers were unstoppable. Amon-Ra St. Brown put on a clinic with 115 yards and 3 touchdowns, while Jameson Williams only needed 2 catches to rack up 108 yards. That's dominance. This was as flawless an offensive performance as you could dream up, and it sends a clear message. The Lions are back and they are dangerous. And hey, if you watched it live, you know exactly why Deion Branch deserves a shout-out for that interception. Now, flipping it to the Bears. We're only 2 weeks in, but man, I was flat out wrong about this team. This is bad. Ryan Poles as GM is now sitting at 15-38 overall, with a brutal 4-22 record on the road. And the defense? Absolutely shredded. There's no way to dress up a 52-21 beatdown against a division rival, especially when this game meant so much to prove their head coach right. The issue is deeper than just one game. This wasn't supposed to be a rebuild year. It was supposed to be the start of the turnaround. The season where you finally take a step toward your future. Instead, over the last 5 quarters, the Bears have been outscored 73-28. That's not just losing, that's getting embarrassed. At this point, I don't know what the answer is. Because honestly, how do you fix the Chicago Bears? The Cardinals narrowly survived against the Panthers, pulling out a 27-22 win. Early on, this looked like it was going to get ugly quick. Carolina opened the game with 2 Bryce Young turnovers on their first 2 drives, and right then I thought, here we go again. That feeling only grew stronger when Arizona came out of halftime and immediately stretched the lead to 27-3. At that point, it felt like déjà vu, exactly how the Panthers' 2024 season began, and it looked like this year's rebuild was about to get just as long and painful. But credit where it's due, Carolina didn't fold. No, this isn't suddenly a playoff team, but I was encouraged that they kept fighting. One frustration though, and it's something that's absolutely fixable, is their late-game play calling. Too many slow-developing deep passes when you're missing multiple starting offensive linemen just isn't going to work. That part needs to change. On the bright side, Bryce Young rebounded nicely after that rough start. But through 2 weeks, my loudest takeaway is this. I don't think Xavier Legette is going to be a long-term answer for this team. He's got 15 targets, only 4 catches, and just 8 total yards. That's beyond frustrating, especially knowing Ladd McConkey was sitting right there on the draft board when Carolina made that pick. As for Arizona, a win is a win, and sitting at 2-0 is the most important thing. But let's be real, Cardinals fans know this style of win can't keep happening. Both victories have come in unnecessarily stressful fashion. First against Spencer Rattler, now against Bryce Young, when they should have been much more comfortable. And that's what I'll be watching moving forward. Can this team close out games? Because against the heavyweights on their schedule, letting teams hang around like this is going to cost them wins in 2025. Broncos-Colts is up, and through 2 weeks, the Daniel Jones-led Colts are 2-0, putting up 62 points in the process, 29 of them coming against Denver. And listen, I could not have been more wrong about the Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson situation heading into this season. Credit to Indy's front office and Shane Steichen's coaching staff for making the bold move and getting it right, because Jones has looked comfortable and efficient. Honestly, I couldn't be happier for them. Now, I do want to point this out, it wasn't all sunshine. This next part is more on Shane Steichen than Daniel Jones, but the end-of-game process was shaky. Settling for a 60-yard field goal attempt as your game winner? That's a questionable call. Luckily, a late penalty bailed them out, and Spencer Schrader nailed a much more manageable 45-yarder to seal it. Still, you don't want to make a habit out of relying on that. Also, the Cam Bynum signing? Tremendous. Through 2 weeks, he's been a difference maker and exactly what this defense needed. Now for Denver. This one has to feel brutal. Will Lutz missed a 42-yarder in a 2-point game. That's tough enough on its own. But then to tack on a leverage penalty on the 60-yard attempt at the end? Are you serious? A leverage penalty. You can argue whether it was soft or just bad timing, but the bottom line is you can't give up 470 yards of offense on the road, lose the turnover battle, and expect to come out with a win. And here's what makes it sting even more. Denver's schedule only gets harder from here. This was one they absolutely could have stolen, and they let it slip away. And next week? A road trip to LA against the Chargers. That's not exactly a get-right spot. We had a Super Bowl 59 rematch in Arrowhead in Week 2, and this time the Eagles came out on top, beating the Chiefs 20-10. Whenever heavyweights like this face off, the game usually boils down to just 1 or 2 plays. And the defining play came in the third quarter. Kansas City was putting together a massive 14-play, 8-minute drive, looking to take the lead in a 13-10 game. Then, at the goal line, Travis Kelce got picked off by Andrew Mukuba. Instead of KC going up, the Eagles turned around and punched it in to make it 20-10. And we've all seen the Chiefs do this exact thing to other teams plenty of times, but this time, it was flipped on them. Now, I don't want to sit here and make this all about Travis Kelce. That's not fair. The bigger story is the issues piling up for Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes was the leading rusher for the second straight game, and you're not winning consistently with that formula. Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco combined for just 53 yards on 18 carries, and both guys are dealing with injuries. On top of that, the Chiefs are 0-2 for the first time in the Mahomes era, and with Baltimore looming in Week 4, there's a very real chance they're staring at a 1-3 start. As for the Eagles, they moved to 2-0, and that's big. But one thing to keep an eye on, not a red flag yet, but something worth monitoring, is how this offense is actually moving the ball. Kevin Patullo is only in his second game as offensive coordinator, but with the amount of talent on this roster, it's a little concerning how stagnant things have looked in the last 6 quarters. That said, I still think Philly will be fine. They're very much in the Super Bowl conversation, and they've shown they can win tough games like this even when the offense isn't fully clicking.